O Holy Mother, enfold us in thy mantle of peace and presence and great power. Draw us deeper, deeper unto thee, deeper unto thy Son, and deeper into the great void of creation. Open our hearts as well as our minds. In the name of Christ Jesus. Amen. Okay. So I've been reading this book, The Kingdom of God is Within You, by Leo Tolstoy. I had no idea. Turns out, I just learned tonight that he was a Vedantist as well as the author of Acclaim. But this came to my attention because I, searching around, found a reference to it as being a seminal piece for both Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And I said, well, gotta read it, right? And it's Leo Tolstoy, right? And it's not War and Peace. So it's got that in its favor right off the bat. Or Anna Karenina. Okay. And it's a hot topic right now because this whole thing has to do with nonviolence and resisting not evil, right? And if you've been following what I've been babbling about for a while now, that's the hot topic. That is it, the topic du jour, for sure. Okay, so he starts out in the first chapter talking about the Catechism of Non-Resistance. This is a piece that was actually written by a Quaker, right? And so he's drawing on the Quaker tradition, looking for an answer that he has as to what happened to the teaching that Jesus gave about not resisting evil, right? And he said, whatever happened to that? Who's been practicing that? And he has many examples of those who haven't been and profess to be followers of the Christ. And so he said, okay, well, who has been? And of course, the Quakers have been doing it for a couple, 300 years or whatever, and have it nailed down in pretty definite terms about what they feel is appropriate or not. At least they did early on, right? And so this guy, Aidan Ballou, was the author of this Catechism of Non-Resistance, and it's questions and answers that are posed, like, FAQ, so where in the Bible does it say anything about non-resistance? And then he answers it, and here's all the passages, and so on. The one thing that I wanted to read to kick this off tonight, the question is, ought the word non-resistance to be taken in its widest sense, that is to say, as intending that we should not offer any resistance of any kind of evil? And the answer is no. It ought to be taken in the exact sense of our Savior's teaching, that is, not repaying evil for evil. We ought to oppose evil by every righteous means in our power, but not by evil. Okay. Okay, so this is kind of clear. We get a sense of what that is. That he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. If you keep following the old teaching of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, all you end up with is a bunch of blind, toothless people eventually, and nothing has advanced. And this whole idea of retribution and revenge and justice, even, that this aberration of the term justice is really a punishment, revenge-based power kind of modality. Okay. So we're not to resist evil for evil, or with evil. And we know then that, okay, I'm not supposed to stick a knife in somebody, and I'm not supposed to shoot somebody, and and so on, and maybe, and this is the Quaker teaching was pretty clear on it. No means no. Don't go to war, don't do anything that supports war, don't participate in it. If somebody comes in and is going to do harm to your family, so there's no two ways about it in their teaching, right? You just don't do violence. Okay. And like I said before, I don't know what would happen if somebody was threatening my family. I would know at the time. I'm not ignorant enough of my own self to say I'm going to make a rule, right? What I am going to do, though, is really get in touch with my moral compass, right? And that's not an outside thing. That's not something that I can read and memorize the do's and don'ts of righteous living. We have a moral compass because we are a moral compass. At our core, we are a God being that is in touch not only with the very deepest part of the Creator, in whom we live and move and have our being, but also with all of creation. We're connected to it all, Creator and creation. And creation means every person in creation. It's not just the rocks and the mountains and the birds and the bees and things that are easy to like. Okay. So he says, no, it ought to be taken in the exact sense of our Savior's teaching, that is, not repaying evil for evil. We ought to oppose evil by every righteous means in our power, but not by evil. Okay. So this business about finding the moral compass, about finding and grounding ourselves in the divine core of our being, and knowing that that is the only true way that we're able to engage the world without becoming part of the world. Be in the world but not of the world. So that we can be here, fully here, not just aloof and flu and new agey and all that. But fully engaged in the world and lustily and drinking deeply of it, right? But not of the world. Okay. We don't lose ourselves in it. We don't forget who we are in that process. That makes, by the way, the smell of a flower insanely delicious. That makes our lovemaking on every level over the top. Our senses, everything is heightened. Everything has a depth to it that we couldn't have foreseen. So it's not a matter, again and again, it's not a matter of becoming, this spiritual ideal that people have. Fully engaged. Okay? And so we see throughout history these ebbs and flows of war and peace, and of the abuses of power and the uprisings against the abuses of power. We see revolutions, and we see regimes, and we see dictators, and we see fascism, and we see all of the things that we've seen, We don't have to look that far back. The 20th century was the bloodiest century on the face of the planet in the history of the planet. It's incredible. So we don't have to look too far for all that. And the takeaway from that should be not that, the world's a messed up place. I hope it doesn't come to my front steps. The takeaway is that none of these people that are doing these things, from the fascist dictator to the person who's being subjugated and who revolts and storms the Bastille with pitchfork in hand, none of these people were bad people. They all had families, they all loved their children, they all had hopes and dreams, they all were God beings, but they were engaged in things which were happening in a sleep state, right? And so nothing improved, right? You have a revolution, yay, violent overthrow, chop off the head of Marie Antoinette. Okay. Did that help? Well, it kind of did, maybe, because you said we were being abused and the landed gentry were doing this, that, and the other, and now they stopped because we killed them all, and now. But we know, if we look at a broader span of history, that these things are cyclical and they don't go away, because it requires not a regime change, it requires a consciousness change. It requires that there's an elevation of consciousness on the individual levels and on the collective level. And now we're talking about why the Master Jesus came to earth, right? To bring to the planet a pattern that will break the mold of eye for eye and tooth for tooth. Love your enemy, resist not evil, he said. Love your enemy, resist not evil. Okay. Hard to do when we're emotionally engaged in the outcome, when it was our field that was being conscripted by the king's men, and our crops are being trampled underfoot, and the landlord is chopping down our forests because he wants to have a few more shekels in the pot or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like that stuff just doesn't change anything. Okay. So, what is it that the Master did? Now, coincidentally, that brings us to the topic of Advent and the lead up to Christmas and into Holy Season, leading up to Easter and the Ascension, right? And the resurrection and the Ascension. This is the essence of esoteric Christianity. This is what it's all about. This period here gives us the object lesson in it. And right now, it's real easy to know what exactly we're talking about because it's not theoretical. It's not like we have to stretch our thinking to say, or our imaginations to say, what would it be like if I felt really bad about the way things were going? People are waking up depressed, they're waking up fearful, they're waking up stressed out there. And so they're saying, what am I going to do? What's my response to it? And of course, the knee-jerk response that most of us have to these things is the animal's response, you know, that it's the flight or fight response. And that makes sense because we live in an animal body and that we're subject to certain of the animal instincts, but we're not just that. We're here to spiritualize the animal, if you want to put it that way, to raise that up so that the body that we're in becomes a vehicle through which the more refined essence of self and spirit can manifest. You know, there's tons to talk about that, how the regeneration of the body and the mind go hand in hand, and what the body of light is all about. And we'll be talking more about that as we get moving towards Easter. That's everything to do with this journey, right? Okay. So now we find ourselves at this period, this moment. We're almost at the second week of Advent. And we want to align ourselves. We want to take advantage of something that's happening on a planetary scale. We're all aware of our own journey and our own responsibility to follow the way and how we respond to the beck and call of the divine within us, right? And it seems like a lonely journey. And it seems like we're talking about the hope for the planet resting on the shoulders of one person here and one person there and another person over there who are coming awake and the little lights are flashing on and you say, well, that's great. We're doomed. There's not enough of us. Right? And that's the difference here, because that's been with us always. We've always had the ability, the opportunity to follow the way. The way isn't new in that regard. It's been laid down from the beginning of creation. It's the way home, right? But what the Master Jesus did was to, through conscious application of living symbolism, etch into the very fiber of the planet, then and for all time, the evolutionary arc that the planet was to follow. And if you're on the planet, then yeah, you're going to come along for that ride as well. Okay? Or, because free will trumps everything, or not. You know, if you're not going to do it, you're not going to dig in your heels, then you're going to feel a resistance to the increased energy and light, and that's uncomfortable. You know, and so what happens when you are resisting that increased energy? In an electrical circuit, if you have more energy being pumped through a circuit that has a resistor on it, it heats up. And so the first destruction of the world was by water, and the second was by fire. And that's what's happening now. And it's not just like there's going to be an event where there's fire. We are on fire now. Vibration is just a matter of relativity. It's relative to another level of vibration. And so if you dig in your heels and say, I resist growth, and I resist the light that is pouring into me and into the planet itself, then the vibrational level of the planet rises relative to your stationary place, your point of view. Stuck here, here's everything else, and because this is a higher rate of vibration, you relate to that and experience that as heat. Okay, now heat is a purifying thing, and so most of us go through periods of that where we're being burned and purified, and that's good, right? It's all good. Ultimately, in this cosmic scheme of things, nothing is lost and nothing is wasted, right? And if we can take solace in the fact that there's no such thing as time, and so who cares if it takes us years or lifetimes or many, many, many lifetimes to finally get it through our thick heads that all we need to do is let go and enjoy the ride, and so be it. Nobody's mad about that. So it's not that kind of, you know, hellfire and damnation kind of thing, and original sin in that kind of context. Okay. So I had written something a while back about this time of the year, and it's apropos to bring it out again, which I did online, but I think it's important to maybe dig into it a little bit. I'd kind of like to just take a breath here, because now we're talking about entering into the reality of the Immaculate Conception and the reality of the virgin birth. Okay. Because without that, there's no Christmas, right? And so, what is that? Okay. As we approach winter solstice and Christmas, we experience an increase in the darkness, a time of long nights and short days. Interiorly, we experience what seems to be an eclipsing of the sun within, our very core. Of course, self is still there, still glowing away, but we find ourselves more aware of the great deep of unmanifest light than we do of our solar being. The immediacy of this is more subtle underworld, of the immediacy of this more subtle underworld of our being can be unsettling as we find bubbling to the surface our greatest fears, our sense of aloneness, even depression. But just beyond the surface ripples, we find her, the one who has always been waiting for us to take heart and allow ourselves to be wounded by these surface impressions so that we could enter her realm. It is this inner beckoning to unite with her that we feel as the spirit of Christmas. as we align ourselves with this cosmic pull, as we give ourselves over to it, withholding nothing, we yearn to reach out to her outstretched arms, rushing into her embrace and being impregnated by the sun at a deeper level than we had ever known before. It is no wonder that Hanukkah is celebrated as the festival of lights, or that we have a built-in instinct to place candles in windows or lights on Christmas trees. We are reaching out in the darkness to the sun, and in that field of yearning we find her and are prepared to give birth to the Christos anew. This is beyond any religion. This is the universe in and around us, blessing us with the increased light, life, and love. Is it any wonder that we are filled with the heartfelt desire to give at this time of year? So, looks like we're going to talk about this. There are beings who just work with the planet, who love and cherish and care for it. There are angels and archangels. There are nature spirits. There are bodies of beings just like us, just like you and me, who have discovered the timelessness of being and the light, the eternal light. Is the Mother Mary. Who knows that the way to the Son, to the Christ, through her Son, the Master Jesus, is through peace. It's the peaceful heart that realizes the God being, the Self, the Christ. And we think about these beings as being so beyond us, and that their sight and insight and their consciousness of reality is so far beyond what we can even imagine, that the idea that someone could be sad at heart for the condition and suffering of mankind is almost impossible to grasp. But the depth of that concern is what is really impossible for us to grasp. The depth of that compassion and that empathy. Here's a being who has placed herself so close vibrationally to us that it doesn't take hardly anything to touch her. There's a price to pay for placing yourself that close to things. And she's paid it and paying it. Mary and Jesus are the two faces of the eternal Christ. It's not one or the other. But there are times when one aspect or the other will be dominant in our striving and in our awareness, and will be responding to one or the other calling. But ultimately, it's a balance that we are called to. The neither male nor female. For at our core, we are Christ. At our core, we are androgynous. And there's great power and there's great peace in that. There is such a temptation to succumb to the Sirens' call. To move towards one polarity or another polarity, whether it's the male or the female, whether it's political polarization, whether it's, you name it. And that polarization, that Sirens' call, will ultimately help dismantle everything that is unreal, so that the new can be formed out of the primal matter that is left, the composted essence of being, of personality, of ego, of society, of culture, of the political world, of governments. In whatever form that takes, I'm not pretending to prophesize about how things are going to play out. I don't think we know. But we do know that those forces calling us to follow polarities are increasing. The intensity is getting more strong and harder to resist. Whereas we might have been able to be centered and feel our connection with the divine and our own place in the universe, as those energies intensify, we may find that I'm swaying this way or that way more often and more intensely, and there's a violence in that. There's a violence in that. And when we're talking about not fighting evil with evil, that's the evil. That's the draw, the the call to the dark side. You know, if we're going to use pop culture terms. Being seduced by the dark side. What is it that happens when we're succumbing to that? How do you feel when you're doing that? At the moment, it feels good. It feels powerful. There's energy, literally energy associated with it. But that's such a short-term kind of a thing, and all we've done then is added now more energy to whichever pole we happen to be attached to. And when it comes to this kind of a thing, one polarity is not better than another. They're both not self. They're both just energetic opposites. So that's happening. We see that. We see that it's happening in us. We see it happening in people around us, in the society, and we see it on social media. We see it in everything that we pick up and read. One way or another, that's happening. And it's not just happening in this country, it's happening around the world. It's been happening around the world since the beginning. Okay? But the heat's gotten turned up under that burner. So Jesus said, I have not come to bring peace but a sword. And that's part of what it is that's happening, is that there's this cutting away of all that is false and that is unreal. And just in the same way that Kali would just trample underfoot all that is finite and that is unreal. So that what is real can emerge out of that. Okay. So we don't want to perpetuate the process. It's going on all by itself. It's been intensified. We can even say that it needed to be intensified, and it's a good thing that it's been intensified. But we also know that we've got a calling to be placeholders for that place at the center. Okay. The other sides don't need any help. They've got plenty of help. What doesn't have a lot of help is the placeholders. Those who can say, yes, this is the reality. That doesn't mean they're not active in the world. That doesn't mean that they are not engaged in the world. That doesn't mean that they're not speaking out against what needs to be addressed and pointed out. It means that they are sitting in the divine place, the Holy of Holies, and they are not reacting to things. Reaction is a function of polarization. You're pushed this way, you get pushed back the other way. Every action has an opposite and equal reaction. That pendulum's been swinging for millennia, right? It's that place in the center, that place of equilibrium, that is where the new heaven and the new earth are being formed. And I can't stress this enough. We're not talking about, oh boy, wouldn't it be nice if we had a better electoral system. We're talking about a shift in consciousness which stops that pendulum from swinging from one polar extreme to the other. And in that place we find the promise that Mary embodies. That the Master has said, I go to prepare a place for you. And where I am, there ye may be also. I will come for you. That's what he's talking about, not getting flown up into some place in the sky. It's right here now, right? And all we need to do is have the chutzpah to stop aligning ourselves with these polar opposites. People who are addicted, and it is an addiction, believe me, not unlike any other addiction. People who are addicted to their polar extreme and who have those worldviews that are supported by and support those extremes aren't going to be happy if they think that you aren't participating in that game. But we're not talking about hoping to be understood. We're talking about embracing and embodying the promise. So yes, Christmas, we're ramping up, we're leading up to solstice, the time of the longest night and the shortest daylight hours. And we see that playing out around us. We see it, we can feel the effects of that. And it's way beyond just the seasonal affective disorder or that kind of thing that people have. It's at a very deep level. We are being offered the opportunity to peer more deeply into the recesses of the subconscious. And by subconscious, I'm talking about the underworld of being, that which is below the surface of things. This is the divine feminine. This is what the Mother Mary embodies for us. And so as we do that, the very first thing that we are encountering are all the things that go bump in the night and the things that scare us and the things that we're afraid of and the things that make us angry. And those patterns of living that have been implanted in us, or that we have allowed to be implanted in us, or that we have implanted ourselves and have been watering and tending and reinforcing. Okay? Those are all the things on the very surface of this wonderful place within, this depthless depth. And for most people, when we confront or are confronted by this dweller on the threshold that's saying, don't come any further, don't look any deeper, don't go take another step because you think you're scared now. What do you think is going to happen when you go further? And that's been a turning back point for many, many people in their meditations. Right? We come to a certain point of letting go, and that kicks in. And that's just part of the program. But each time we go deeper and fearlessly go deeper, and we let go, and we submit, and we trust in the fact that we live in a beneficent being who cares only one thing, and that is that we remember who we are. Because when we dive finally beneath that layer of surface disturbance, we find the source and sustenance of all of creation as primal matter. As primal matter. Formlessness. Alive, filled with potential, wanting to just create and give and nurture. That's the only way to go the distance. We can't be looking at the Godhead and saying, I'm going that way because that's where the power is. It's this way because that's where the power isn't. This is where the humility is, where the purity is, where the service is. Where that obedience is. So all the things that we read in the Bible about the story of Mary and her encounter with the angel, the archangel, and her becoming impregnated, and the journey to Bethlehem, and the manger scene, and the animals that come and bow down on bended knee, and the wise men following the star in the east, and all of these things, you know, the shepherds. These are all classic symbols of the mystic path. And we just need to read those things and get a feel for those things and allow ourselves to be taken along for that ride that shows us, that reveals to us within our own self what those deeper meanings are, what is really being portrayed there. We can read a little here and hear a little tidbit here about this symbol and that symbol and all that, and you know, I'm prone to throw out stuff periodically myself, but it's all garbage because you're hearing it from your outside. You know, sorry, it has to come from within. The birth of the Christ has to happen in each of us anew each time. And that means the whole journey has to happen. And each time it does, it takes us deeper and deeper, and that onion gets peeled, and we discover that place that has been prepared for us, and the place that we are being told that we must cherish and hold for others, to be placeholders. So what happens is that as that intensity grows and as the insanity grows, and we can relate to this in our own selves, and we can extrapolate and see what's happening on the world stage in this way, as that intensity and insanity grows, as everything becomes more frenetic and intense like that, then more and more of us reach a breaking point. And say, I can't take it anymore, I quit. And that is the beginning of awakening. And so if you have felt that already, and you have been introduced to a deeper level of being, and you have had experiences of being a placeholder in the midst of turmoil, then practice that and exercise that and know that to be your calling. And then if you attend a rally, or you write to a congressperson, or you do whatever it is that you feel directed and guided to do, it won't be as a participant, it will be as a placeholder. And you will be there because you have been directed to be there. And you will know that. It's not like, yeah, I think I should do this because my friends are going, and they're going to think I'm, flaking out on them if I don't show up. Right? We've done that. That's been done to death. Let's do this one differently. And the time is now. This is why I hear it from more and more people. This is why I was born. This is why I came. This is what it's all about. I've had whatever training, I've had whatever spiritual experiences. This is the time. Right? So, let's do it. Okay. Master Jesus, we give such thanks for the calling that we have heard and have responded to, that brings us together, that brings us to the great way which has been prepared for us, that we may traverse that way and make it easier for those who follow. Help us in this, for we have no desire but to serve. In your name and in the presence and by the example of our Mother Mary. Amen. And that's that.